It's gonna be the intro of the video. It's just Elwood sitting on my shoulder rumbling.
That's fair. Oh, it's up time.
Oh, it's uppies time. We got double boys for the intro. Double kitty boys.
I say you gotta put them both in the thumbnail. You'll get all the views.
Yes. Hey y'all, I'm Hope, and Jacob is here over behind the camera.
Hello.
And we're gonna be doing the mid-year freakout tag today because we thought it would be fun to do a little like mid-year wrap up together. And I always like to do this tag in the middle of the year and just kind of reflect on what I've been reading so far. So that's the plan for today. And I think there's no other housekeeping stuff. I think we're ready to just dive into the questions.
Yeah.
So, starting with the first question, which is best book you've read so far in 2023. Do you want to go first or?
You can go first.
Okay. The best book I've read so far in 2023 was Silver Nitrate by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, which is a kind of historical fiction horror novel that's set in the 90s in Mexico, and it follows Montserrat and Tristan, who are a sound engineer and an actor, respectively, who get involved with this kind of cult classic horror director who says that he has like unfinished film that is cursed and he wants our help fixing it. And it's just really fun. It's a really slow burn at the start, but then it just like kicks into high gear in the second half of the book, and there is so much good like creepy occultist stuff going on in the latter half. It's just a lot of fun. So I really enjoyed that, and I think it's maybe not even the highest rating I've given this so far this year, but it's definitely the book I've had the most fun reading. And I think the one that's probably going to stick with me the longest.
So mine would be Swim by Eric C. Watt. This is a lit fic book about I think he's a Hong Kongese American individual. He's born to parents that immigrated to America from Hong Kong. He's living in LA. He is a gay man who is basically a high functioning crystal meth addict. And he is kind of thrown into this big change when his mother, the matriarch of the family who controlled most of the family aspects, very suddenly passes away. And he is now kind of thrown into the middle of taking care of his father, who's never really taken care of his own things before. His grandmother, who's 99 years old, who has dementia. A lot of the family aspects, a lot of the funeral planning, and it's a matter of him trying to work with that and kind of be thrust into this new role while also fighting the struggles that come with his meth addiction, as well as in and off and on contact with his ex-boyfriend. So it's a very, there's a lot of personal drama going on. I think for this being a debut for Eric Watt, he does it really well. All the characters are really well fleshed out. Everything feels very realistic, which is something I really like for this, because I feel like with stuff with this much drama going on, it can very easily go down the path of being melodramatic. I think he does a really, really good job of kind of towing that line and making things feel very grounded and be almost like a really good character study of someone who's got this high-functioning addiction but is now having to fight that alongside this brand new situation that he's having, that he really was very much forced into, along with dealing with his own grief and things like that. So I think it was really good. I think that's the only 5-star I've given this year so far, so I am definitely my favorite so far.
Question number 2 is the best sequel you've read. And if I remember correctly, we talked about this. This is like the hardest one for both of us to answer because neither of us has really read any sequels.
Yeah.
I've read a couple of like continuations in manga series. I think that's what you've read too.
I've read a lot of manga. The closest thing to a sequel I think I've read is How To by Randall Munroe, which is another book that he wrote after What If, which is something I read last year or the year before one. But I wouldn't really call it a sequel. Mm-hmm. But it's more like a follow-up in the same vein as another book he's done. I've not read any true sequels this year. Yeah,
I haven't really either. And the few manga volumes I've read that were continuing series I've already started, I have not been standouts. I've been oh, this is good, I'm having a good time, but nothing that stuck out as particularly great. So then question number 3 is a new release you haven't read yet but you want to, and I need to pull my stack closer to me. I should have planned that better.
Let's not have it fall.
Yeah, it'll be okay. I had 2 to mention. So my phone down so I can hold them, because these were both ones that came out recently. You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Kaylin Bayron, which came out I think just this past Tuesday, which is a kind of Friday the 13th-esque YA slasher that sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun, and I've been hearing some good reviews of this one. And then the other one was, if I can get a hold of it, Witch King by Martha Wells, which I think I've heard a lot more mixed reviews on this. I've heard that there's a lot of like really confusing naming stuff happening, but I don't really remember what this is about. I just know that I really love Murderbot books, so I'm excited to read this anyway, and I just like the way that Martha Wells writes her like character voices, so I think that I'm probably going to like this anyway.
So my new release I haven't read yet but want to is a manga. It's called Beat in Motion by Naoki Fujita. It is a manga about I'm very loosely recalling the details here, but it's about an individual who his passion in life is drawing. He wants to go into animation. However, as a child he was bullied really heavily for wanting to become an artist, so he's kind of hidden that part away from him. He tries to go into music, but he doesn't have a ton of musical talent. So he's, very kind of down on his luck, not feeling very, not in a good place. And then he has an encounter with an individual who very much encourages him to get back to drawing, maybe, and this leads him to making, I think, it's some sort of video that goes viral. I want to say it's like an animation video. And it goes viral, and he gets contacted to work with a musician that he really likes, and that ends up being the person that encouraged him to, get back out and doing it. Although she does not remember this because she was very drunk at the time, and it's about their, partnership that kind of comes along with that. Him doing the artist and her doing the music part. So I know it won a couple awards. It just started serialization on Manga Plus, so I do plan on reading it here relatively soon. It's only about 10 chapters in. It's very, very new. But it started back in February, and I've heard really, really good things from the people I know that keep up with stuff like this. So I'm very excited about it.
Question number 4 is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And I actually already made a whole video of anticipated releases for the second half of the year. So I'm going to put that in the cards above and in the description down below, so you can check that out if you want to. But just to mention a few that I'm like the most excited for. Most of these are continuations of series that I already love. So He Who Drowned the World by Shelley Parker Chan, I think comes out in August. Power Unbound and System Collapse, I think, come out in November maybe. And then Mammoths at the Gates, which I can't remember when that one comes out, but I know they're all kind of later in the fall. And then the last one I had to mention was The Death I Gave Him by MX Lu, which is a locked room thriller sci-fi retelling of Hamlet, which I just think sounds like fun, and Hamlet's my favorite Shakespeare play, so really looking forward to that one. But those are kind of my top 4, and I have that video linked if you want to check out those.
You made a full video, and I didn't even... I struggled with this one. I don't really keep up with releases.
Yeah.
I put one that's something that isn't even confirmed to be happening, but something I kind of hope will be happening in the second half of the year. Mm-hmm. And that is an English translation for Mujina Into the Deep by Inyo Asano, which is another manga. Inyo Asano is the author and artist behind Goodnight Punpun, which was my favorite book of last year. This is a brand new publication of his that started back in January. To my knowledge, it has not had any English translations, official or fan, done yet. So I'm really kind of hoping that someone jumps on that, because I've tried reading the raws and I don't read Japanese. So so it's kind of hard to understand what's going on. So I'm hoping, like it's nothing confirmed, but I would like to see maybe that get picked up sometime of the year. Like I said, either officially or by a fan translation group. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's something I'm very much will hope that will happen in the last 6 months, because it's had a few chapters come out, but nothing's gotten translated yet. Question
number 5 is your biggest disappointment so far this year. Mine was The Spare Man by Mary Robinette Kowell, which actually made me really sad, because this was one that I was really looking forward to. It's a sci-fi mystery set on a space station, not a space station, a spaceship that is traveling. It's like a cruise. It's basically a space cruise. And the main character and her new husband are on their honeymoon, and they get involved in a murder mystery that happens on this like space cruise ship. This should have been perfect for me on paper, But the first part of the book had a bunch of like leaps of logic that did not work, and so I could not suspend disbelief. So there's a lot of stuff at the beginning that kind of gets the events rolling that just did not work for me and found really frustrating. And then the middle bit was great. Really good investigation. I really enjoyed all the middle sections. I liked the characters. And then you get to the end, and the twist for this book comes completely out of left field. There was like almost no way you could guess this, or there's like very minimal clues given that this is going to happen, and it just feels kind of unfair because there's like a bunch of plot threads that just get dropped all of a sudden at the end and in service of this like random twist. So I just felt like the beginning and end of this book really didn't work, but the middle was fun, which made it really disappointing for me because I thought it was going to be like a new favorite. But
so my biggest disappointment was All the Names They Use for God by Anjali Sachdeva. I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's a short story collection. I read some really, really rave reviews for it. I went in with a lot of hope. A lot of the stories were going to be very horror inspired. A lot of the main kind of connecting force between all the stories was this idea of like destiny, fate kind of thing, and the feeling of being alone at times. And do not get me wrong, I gave it 3 stars. I enjoyed it overall, but compared to kind of how much it was built up to me, both by reviews I read and people I know that had read it, it was very much a disappointment because there were a lot of stories in there that were at best just boring. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, that is the biggest sin that can happen with books, is to be boring. So there are a couple really good ones in there. I remember really liking the story called Glass Lung that's in there, about a father who was the victim of a furnace explosion and when they were in the process of first learning how to make fiberglass. So basically, as it exploded, he inhaled a ton of glass, and it very much hindered him for the rest of his life. And it's a story about him that happening when his daughter was really young, and then her growing up and her wanting to go away. And it's a really, really well done story about kind of aging and not being able to go along with what your child is doing. I thought it was really touching. But a lot of the stories in there, it's just nothing really memorable. I'm sitting here struggling to remember a lot about the other stories. So that one was very much a disappointment. Like I said, it's not bad. If you want to read, if someone out here listening looks at it and says, "Oh, this sounds really interesting," I give it a shot. I wouldn't avoid it, but I personally found it disappointing.
Now, the good news is the next question is, what is your biggest surprise? So we get to go in kind of the opposite direction, in a more positive direction, which is nice. So my biggest surprise was Jujutsu Kaisen Volume 1, because I had no idea what to expect from this one, and I ended up having a really good time reading it. It is very silly. There's a lot of like really random stuff that just never gets explained, but it's nothing that like hinders your understanding of what's happening. It's just like silly and over the top. Like there's a character who is a panda who talks. And there's no explanation given for Panda. Panda simply exists. Panda simply is. But it's just, like, very silly and, like, ridiculous. And in a way that, like, it doesn't ruin the suspension of disbelief. Because it's just like, yeah, this is all so wild anyway. This may as well happen. There may as well be a guy who only talks in rice cake fillings. Like, that may as well be a thing. That's fun. We'll just go with it. So I've been enjoying this, and I've continued on with the series. And, yeah. Ended up enjoying this a lot more than I was expecting to.
My biggest surprise so far of the year has been You and I Are Polar Opposites by Kucha Agasawa, which is another manga. It is a manga series very different to yours, where it's very much an action series. This one is actually primarily a romance. Mm-hmm. It's contemporary romance type thing between 2 classmates. The guy is a very quiet, very laid back individual, whereas the girl is a very loud, boisterous, expressive person, and they start a relationship on the very first chapter, and it's one of those where a lot of characters are kind of pairing off with each other, and all the characters are really, really well done. Again, they feel very realistic, which for me in stories like this, that's a big plus. Again, I hate going a lot very deep into melodrama and things like that, which is very easy to do, especially in manga, I feel like. So this one, everything feels very grounded. The relationships feel very realistic. It's funny. It's very, very. There have been a lot of times where I have laughed out loud reading this, either due to the jokes themselves, the expressions, the art for this is phenomenal. So it's definitely It was a very big surprise because it reminds me a lot, for anyone that's familiar with manga like this, it reminds me a lot of Horimiya, but fixing a lot of the issues I ended up having with Horimiya at the end, in which it's very consistent with its development and it's not stalled a lot and gone back into these tropes that can definitely be viewed as sexist. It's very much avoided that. It feels like I said, it feels like it's patching up a lot of the things that Horimiya has kind of did wrong, at least in my eyes, but has really built up on it. So I really enjoyed it. It's still releasing. It only started last year, so it's definitely nowhere close to done, but I read every chapter when it releases every week. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where this goes as time goes on.
So question number 7 is your favorite new author, either a debut author or a new to you author. And this was hard for me because I haven't read a whole lot of new authors this year, and most of the ones I've read, I've ended up rating their books in kind of middling 3.5 stars. I've had a lot of 3 and 3.5 stars this year, but I ended up going with R.F. Kuang because I'm currently reading Yellowface and really enjoying it. I think it's a really weird reading experience, but like I think that she has a lot of skill, and you really see that come through in this book, and I like the way that she's writing the character voices here. I think that her kind of plot structure is really interesting, so I'm really excited to finish up Yellowface and then go back and read some of her earlier work, because I think that I'm going to end up really liking her writing across all the different like genres that she's written in.
So I actually have a couple answers for this one. One being Eric C. Watt, who wrote Swim, which I mentioned is my favorite book of the year so far. I did want to at least mention him because I found his writing really enthralling. Swim is the only work of fiction that he's released. I do believe that he has a couple of nonfiction books about LGBTQ populations of Asian individuals in California and the Los Angeles area and the struggles that they've faced individually. So I do think he has a couple essays like that out. If you would want to hunt them out, I intend to try and at least find them because I think that's interesting. But the one I really want to point out here is another mangaka called Kinetsu Yamada, who has written manga like Sweat and Soap, as well as one that I'm going to mention a couple times here in a little bit called Telework Yotobanashi. I think that she does a really phenomenal job, again, of writing very grounded stories, having really good art, having really good characters, things like that. Her manga have very much been kind of regaled as, like, if you're looking for good manga stories that actually involve adults instead of children or high school kids, like so many of them do, a lot of people end up kind of pointing to her, and so far everything I've read of her stuff is not disappointed.
Question number 8 is your newest fictional crush.
Okay.
And I don't really have a good answer for this. I don't really do fictional crushes. Just not a thing for me. The closest thing I had was I wanted to mention Phil from A House with Good Bones. He's this like neighbor character in that one, and I think the reason I like him is that the main character of that book has a very similar sense of humor to mine, and Phil just kind of like rolls with the punches, and he's just like, plays off of her, and they have a really fun little friendship that develops, and it's really sweet, and I really like the way that he interacts with her, like sense of humor.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'll put closest thing of mine was again from another manga. I just mentioned Telework Yotobanashi, the main female character in that, Natsu Izumi. She reminds me a lot of you, so that kind of drew me in a little bit. But she's probably the closest, is that, and just because that character's very funny and again well written, and again she reminds me a lot of you, so it kind of was a natural draw.
Question 9 is your newest favorite character, just kind of in general. And I had 2. What?
Go ahead.
You looked like you were about to say something.
No, I'm excited to talk about mine.
Oh, that's fair. Mine, I have 2. It's Hwani and Maywol from The Forest of Stolen Girls. They're 2 sisters who are extremely different personalities. They have very different skill sets, but I really liked both of them, and I thought that their relationship was really interesting. So I just kind of enjoyed following both of them and seeing the different ways that they approached obstacles, because they were kind of working together, but they would both have very different ways of thinking through problems, where Juani is very about like logic and reasoning and, what's the most sensible way I can deal with this, whereas Maywol is much more intuitive and relies much more on emotion and kind of thinking on her feet, which I think was really interesting. And so I like the dynamic between them a lot, and I enjoyed seeing the way that their like sister relationship evolved over the course of the story.
Mine is a gentleman named Hiroki Dan from a manga called Brutal by Kei Koga. Hiroki is a top-level detective in Tokyo. Seen very kind, very passionate individual, always taking on these very tough cases. But Mr. Dan is, he is also on the side a serial killer that hunts down, tortures, and kills the perpetrators of a lot of the crimes that he is investigating. And he is I read Brutal earlier this year. Recommend it if you're looking for something that's morbid in a funny way. It is very harsh how brutal he is to these guys, but on the other hand, they're all individuals that are doing much worse things. So it's very much this idea of, he has this idea of purging these people from the earth to make it a better place in God's eyes. So his logic is twisted, but there's something about the joy that he takes in it that is both very funny and very disturbing. And seeing how much that in a very weird way he cares about the cases he cares about getting rid of these people. It's a very twisted thing, but I couldn't help but laugh at times with some of the actions that he did in that. So it's
really lives up to its title.
Very much. It's brutal is brutal. It's very much so.
Totally different emotional tone. A book that made you cry. What a transition.
Yeah.
My choice was The Deep by River Solomon, because this is a very difficult book. It's really fascinating. It's about these people that live in the ocean who are the descendants of women who were thrown overboard during the transatlantic slave trade, and it's the children that they were pregnant with when they were thrown overboard have survived and become the Wagenru who live in the ocean. And it's about their historian and about just that history and the holding of that history. And it's just a really difficult story, but it's really beautifully written. And there is in particular a character moment right at the end of this book that had me like sobbing at my desk when I was listening to the audiobook. I was at work and I'm like sitting in my cubicle with my back to the door because that was the way it was set up. There's like tears streaming down my face going, I really hope nobody needs anything from me right now, because they're going to be like, are you okay? And I have to be like, no, I'm not. Yeah, the ending of this was just really, I think, kind of bittersweet in a way that just struck me really hard, and I absolutely love this, and I definitely want to get back to it at some point.
Phenomenal book. Overall.
Yeah.
We both read this, and I think we both gave this 5 stars.
Yeah, I think so.
It's absolutely phenomenal book. Alright, so mine was, and you're probably going to look at me weird when I say this, but it was Chainsaw Man by Tutsuki Fujimoto.
That's a choice.
Yeah, well, now, hold on, let me explain myself. Chainsaw Man, for one, fantastic manga. If you love action manga, very much give it a try if you haven't already. It's one of the big talked about ones. But there are, and people who have read this will probably know the moments I'm talking about, but there are 2 particular moments, 2 particular deaths, I will say, in the latter half of the first part. So probably volumes 8 through 11, where the first part of the manga ends. There's a couple of very tough character deaths that very much did make me tear up. Just because they're characters that you really got used to and got really attached to, and seeing how they affected Denji at the end of the day was really tough to see, especially one which happened before the final climax of that first part. So it definitely that definitely did make me tear up. The rest of the manga usually made me go holy shit or what the fuck. So it's definitely, I think, if anything, I think that's a testament to the author's ability to, put these serious moments in with this batshit moments of action, which make up the bulk of the of the series, but it's I think that it's pretty multifaceted, or more than you would expect from something called Chainsaw Man.
Now we get to do another whiplash moment into a different emotional tone again, because the next one is a book that made you happy, and mine is A House of Good Bones. I've already mentioned Phil, but I just really enjoyed the humor in this book. I will say this is a pretty dark book at a lot of points, and the themes in it are really tough. There's a lot of stuff about family. This is about a young woman who, she's a, oh gosh, what's the word for it? Hang on.
Entomologist?
Well, she's an entomologist, but specifically for like archaeological digs. Might be archaeoentomologist. I think that's it. Anyway, she looks at bugs at archaeological sites, and she's really, like, clearly very smart, cares a lot about her work, really fascinated with insects and archaeology and all these things. And I really enjoyed the way that kind of played into the way that she dealt with things in this book. But she's just been kind of temporarily laid off because the dig that she was involved in, they discovered, I think it was like, they discovered remains that might be more recent. And so there was a bunch of like legal hoops that had to be dealt with before they could continue the dig. And so she's returning home to small town North Carolina, which is done really well in this book.
Oh, shit.
And she returns home to small town North Carolina and is going back to her mother's house, which used to be her grandmother's house. And she walks in, and the house has started to revert back to the way that it was when her grandmother lived in it. And her mother is acting very strangely. And it's very much about family and about, like, the ways that our histories make us. And it's just really difficult in a lot of ways in that. Like, I think this one would hit really hard for you.
Can I see that?
Yeah.
I'm borrowing this one too.
Okay. Well, can I have it for a second to finish holding it up?
Fine.
I promise. You can take it back with you in a minute. So I think that's really tough. But there's a ton of humor in this, and I really enjoy the way that T. Kingfisher mixes humor with horror. I think it works really well here. And there were a lot of moments in this, particularly with the relationship between the main character and her mother, and the main character and Phil, that was just like making me laugh out loud and had me smiling through several sections of the book. So it was kind of talking of emotional whiplash. This one jumps back and forth between like funny and creepy in like a really engaging way, and I really enjoyed this.
Book that made me happy, I mentioned it earlier, is Telework Yoda Banashi by Kintetsu Yamada. This is a short run manga. It's only about 20 or so chapters. It released earlier this year. It is about a man who is I think he works in IT of some sort. But this takes place during the COVID pandemic. So he is working from home. He's spending a lot of time at home, very, very secluded, and he ends up meeting his neighbor while he's taking care of the garden that he has on his balcony, who is Natsu Izumi, who I mentioned earlier in the fictional crush section. And this is their story about how they get closer to each other, and how her job is that she is, speaking of archaeology, she's an archaeologist. She's a student in archaeology, and they get closer through kind of bonding on his interests in like ancient temples and things like that, and her studying archaeology and their similar interests. And it's their story of getting closer and her kind of drawing him out of his shell. It's very much a story about, getting out of your comfort zone, doing things that you've never done before type deal. It ends really sweet. It's very much recommend it. It's, it was some straight up hands on my chin, kicking my feet in the air type shit. So it's, if you are looking for just a short, quick manga to read that is just a shot of dopamine straight to your veins, I highly recommend it. It's really good.
Well, the next one, and we're almost at the end here, next to last question, is what's the most beautiful book you've bought or received so far this year? So mine is The Red Scholar's Wake by Ali David Ard. This is the Illumicrate version. I actually did not have an Illumicrate subscription when I got this. I ended up buying it off Pango secondhand from somebody who actually did still have it in the original plastic, so it was still in really good condition when it got here. But I love Ali David Ard's writing, and I was really excited they were doing a special edition for this one. This is a marriage of convenience sci-fi romance mystery, so it hits a lot of my like check boxes for things that I love. And I just love the sprayed edges. There goes the signed book plate. That happens every time. It's got this foiling on the front. It's got this like really beautiful end papers. I just think this is a beautiful edition, and I'm really glad that I have it.
Well, I've not purchased a lot of books this year. A lot of what I've been reading I've been loaned from the library and through Libby. However, the one I'm naming is something that didn't even purchase myself. It's something you got for me.
Oh, yeah.
And that is the Junji Ito adaptation of No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. And I definitely would not call this beautiful. However, the artwork I would say is very striking for it, and it's really cool how they do it. Is because you've got the paper jacket on top and it has a little circle with the title and everything on it, and then you take the jacket off and the actual hardcover has this really gruesome. I don't even know how to describe it. It's art by Junji Ito is the best way.
It's really all you have to say.
Yeah, it's really surreal. So that one. It's like I've only gotten 2 physical books this year, and the other one, the cover of it, is just a picture of a paper mill. So this is
thrilling.
Yeah, my options were very limited with this.
Yeah,
but I do really like the artwork for it. Like I said, I would not call it beautiful, so I'm kind of cheating on this.
It's much more like striking and like
is the perfect
evocative.
way. Yeah. Striking is a really good way to do it because it's one of those I feel like most people look at it once you see it on a shelf with the covers out, you're going to be kind of drawn to it just because it's very the way that, like I said, with the jacket and the underneath cover, it's a very unique kind of looking book.
So then the very last question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And I suspect we both have a long list.
I've got a few lists, although I have a couple things on here that I have thought about that I do want to read that I'll probably mention at the end.
That's fair. I have so many. I'll include like a little list here, but I have my priority TBR. I've read 2 of the 12. I was meaning to read one every month.
Great.
I take it back. I've read 1 of the 12, and I unhauled the other one.
Great.
Because I read the description, and I started to read it, and I was like, wow, I do not like this.
That's more 1 of 11.
Yeah, so I have like 10 more of those, and I'll just put like a little list somewhere over here. And then I have just a whole other stack. We have Priory of the Orange Tree, which I should be finishing this month. It's not going to happen because the end of this month is in a few days. So, Priory of the Orange Tree, it's a giant brick. I want to finish it and find out how I feel about it. But that's one. I've also started the First Law trilogy, and this is one I actually do want to get back to. I was really enjoying this, and I really wanted to read this and kind of keep up with the Catch Up Book Club live shows, but I'm still reading book 1, and I think the live show for book 3 is in a few weeks or a couple of weeks, so I don't know that I'm going to make it in time for that, but I am hoping that maybe next month I could binge through and finish these books. I am really enjoying them though, and I'm excited to get back to them. We have The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi, just because a lot of people have been reading this, and I'd love to join those conversations. And it sounds like a lot of fun. It's a pirate adventure fantasy that I really liked the first few pages. I read them just to get a sense of what the writing was like, and I really liked the kind of narrative voice that was being established here. So I think this one's going to be a lot of fun. And then I didn't pick up both books, but I have the first and second books of the Lake Witch trilogy by Stephen Graham Jones, which I bought this one thinking, or rather I pre-ordered the second one thinking I would have read this one beforehand because I intended to read this last year at Halloween. And then I did not get to it. I didn't have time because school was happening. And I still need to read it. And now I also have the second book. So I don't know why I keep putting these off because I love Stephen Graham Jones writing, but someday I will actually pick them up. So all of those, plus I still have a bunch of stuff in my currently reading. I don't know if I'll put a picture here or not, but I have like 18 books am I currently reading right now, so all of those as well.
Okay, so my own list, it's probably not as long as yours.
Probably not, but I start a lot of things, so.
Yeah. But the ones I want to get through right now, I'm currently have started, I just mentioned No Longer Human, the Junji Ito adaptation. I do want to get that done pretty soon. I have loaned and then returned without opening I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy twice now. I will get that read sometime this year.
Fair.
I have returned it twice without even opening it because I've run out of time, and just because I've not had the opportunity or time to sit down and listen or read it. So I am bound and determined to get that damn thing read this year. There's a book I recently found out about that actually sounds really good. Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver.
Oh yeah, I think my aunt read that and she said it was really good.
Yeah, that's another one I've read a lot of rave reviews about, which I do tend to be kind of a sucker for, especially reading the description and it happening kind of in the neck of the woods that we grew up in. So that's something that I'm really interested in reading because I'm a sucker for stuff like that. Getting into manga, I mentioned Sweat and Soap earlier, again by Kentetsu Yamada. That's a manga that you gave me the first volume for. I kind of want to see if I can't get the entire series done, or the entire series done before the end of the year. It's only 12 or so volumes, so not too big.
Yeah.
And that's one that's been on my TBR for manga to read for quite a while. I don't have a specific one here, but they make Pokemon manga, and I've heard they're very hit or miss. I kind of want to see what that's about.
Yeah.
I kind of want to explore that being something I can read. Let me see. Oh, another one I wanted to read. I mentioned Ennio Asano earlier. There's a series that he finished up very recently called Dead Demons DDD Destruction. That is another that's also been on my TBR for a little bit to read. Ennio Asano, as I mentioned, his works tend to be very dark. So it's a matter of kind of being in the right mindset to handle something like that. So, we'll see where I end up with that one, but that one is on the list. And then, let's see, anything else on my TBR? Oh, Akira, the original Akira manga. Very popular, very, very popular Japanese anime movie. But the manga is also supposed to be really good. So that's another one I have the full access to the full series for. I do want to read it when I have the time to. That one's, I think, pretty chunky. So it's, and then I'm trying to think, are there actual other books? Oh, I see it because it's on your shelf. I do want to read Mexican Gothic this year, because I do have a copy of it. I've been meaning to read it, so I am. Hopefully, I can.
Just about to pull it out and hand it to you, but forgot you already have a copy. Yeah.
But I do have a copy of it that I would like to read at some point before the end of the year. I don't really do TBRs. It's like, what am I?
You just read what you want to read when you get to it.
What I'm in the mood for. I don't have a YouTube channel. So
that's true. I mean, I'm also a mood reader, so I tend to do the same thing. Like, I'm going to read this month, and then I read completely different things for the entire month.
Fair.
So,
So, but yeah, that's kind of a loose list of things I would like to get to. The only things on there that I am determined to get through is No Longer Human, because I've already started that. And probably I'm Glad My Mom Died. Those are the two that I really want to get read by the end of the year.
Those are the top priority.
Yeah. Especially No Longer Human, because I started it, but God Almighty,
I've heard that's really dark.
The first section's really rough, especially with the art along with it. That adds a whole extra layer to it. I made it to like the end of the first, I guess, volume, I guess you could call it, and I had to put it down. Like, this is fucking rough. So
that's fair.
Kind of wait until the mood strikes me again. If I was like, yeah, let's go into even more depression, because it goes even further off the deep end for my understanding. So, so there we go.
Well, cool. I think that is all of the questions. So
I do believe, yeah.
Yeah, we would love to know what your answers to any of these are, so let us know down in the comments if you have answers for any of these questions. And yeah, we really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, I hope you'll consider giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting every Tuesday and Saturday, and I post with Jacob whenever we can, whenever he's here and we have a chance and we have an idea.
Whenever I'm in town.
Yeah. So we occasionally post things together, and I'm posting twice a week right now. So there is more content coming soon, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.
Bye.